afternoon. It's good to have you all here. Now the big battle is to stay awake after that good meal. I often like to put this picture up and ask everybody if they've been here before. Oh, yeah. I'm originally from Kansas. My mom's from Kansas. My dad's from Kansas. You're from Kansas. Hutchinson. Wow. We were from Newton, Kansas. Just north of Wichita. Huh? Hutchinson? Yeah. Yeah, we had relatives that went to all those churches. But my mom's family moved up to Nebraska because that's where they were from. Here's a picture of my grandfather and my grandmother on my grandmother's dad's car. And my grandmother's dad's office is behind there, and my great aunt's standing off on the side. My grandmother was actually born in Nevada, Iowa, which is where they had the academy and they had a sanitarium. My great-grandfather was a physician at the sanitarium. They would often get patients that Mayo Clinic had given up on, and they would use, the natural treatments that Adventists were so well known for in Battle Creek on these patients and recover them. And then my great-grandfather moved to Nebraska to Blue Springs, right near Beatrice. And he was very active in the local church. I met a pastor who had come to be a pastor at his church right after World War II. He had gotten out of the war, became a pastor. He was just learning to be a pastor. He says, my grandfather taught him how to be a pastor. He says, when he got there, my grandfather had 40 people ready for baptism. And so they baptized him. And so he would often deliver the third, fourth, and fifth child from some farm family, and all he'd gotten was a chicken or something for the payment. It was back in the good old days when, medicine wasn't this big extortionary machine. But that's a little history there from our background. Alzheimer's. I was down here at Ouachita Hills, and the farm manager, pictured there, I think it's Mr. Pope, his wife, pictured there, got Alzheimer's. And he used to have a student of the academy watch her. One day they were having a big picnic, and nobody was watching her. And when they came back to the house, she was gone. And they thought, we should have left the student to watch her, but they hadn't. Well, he looked around the house and around the area, couldn't find, so he called all the students. They scoured the whole campus for her, couldn't find her. Then they called the rescue service, the fire department. They scoured the whole county practically, couldn't find her. Went on national news. Finally, 6 months later, they found her body 13 miles away. She died of exposure. She just wandered off and couldn't figure out her way to get back. And these are the stories you hear about Alzheimer's patients. It doesn't really bother them, but it really bothers their caretakers. In fact, caretakers of Alzheimer's patients make really good test subjects for studying stress. We met at one of our, we were at one of our venues doing a health presentation, and one of the gentlemen there was a caretaker or maybe a nurse on an Alzheimer's unit in town, big Alzheimer's unit. He says, it's stressful because there's this one lady that every day she asks where her husband is. And then he tells her that he had passed away, and she goes through the grieving process as though that's the first time she ever heard it every day. And so they lose their memory, but it doesn't bother them, I say, because, and that's sort of so if you're worried when you're losing your memory, it's a good sign. Can't find my keys. Oh, that frustrates me. Well, good. If it frustrates you, yeah, so the way we figure out if somebody has Alzheimer's is we check their brain. Now, it's not something you do on a live patient usually. Well, we do scan them, and there are some telltale features, but really it's a clinical diagnosis. And but if we were to take a piece of brain, the thing we would find would be amyloid plaque. It's an unusual protein. It isn't supposed to be there, collecting in the brain. And it's associated with this loss of memory, loss of ability to learn, loss of ability to reason, poor judgment, loss of communication skills, loss of ability to carry out daily activities. This amyloid plaque is basically protein that has become oxidized and degenerated. Thus, it would make sense, the more antioxidants you eat, the less oxidized protein you have, the less Alzheimer's. So as we go into the diet aspects of avoiding Alzheimer's, you'll see we're focusing on getting lots of antioxidants, lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. On the other hand, this amyloid plaque is also increased by just lots of unusual protein running around. Guess what recent development has made unusual protein to be running around in people's bodies? COVID vaccines, spike protein, and it seems pretty apparent that a lot of amyloid plaque is being built by spike protein, so they expect Alzheimer's to increase dramatically with everybody that got the jab, So the free radicals, anything that increases free radicals, fried foods, the fried oils, fermented foods, foods that have not been fresh for a while, highly processed foods, all these things, foods that just lack antioxidants, those all contribute. Plus, anything that's too high in iron or aluminum or zinc. Now, aluminum's everywhere, right? It's a big, the soil's full of it, but what do you know that has aluminum in it? Aluminum pans, foil, deodorant, baking soda, baking powder, underarm deodorant. What do you think the food is that has the most aluminum in it? They use it to make it flocculate or turn into a solid. It's about 3% aluminum. Cheese. And then the other one with the, you're speaking about the baking soda, a lot of products that have baking soda will be high in aluminum. Anything from donuts to pancake mixes to cakes, and so they're very high. A lot of injections, like the COVID vaccine, but different vaccines will be high in aluminum. Anyway, and then anything that increases free radicals, it's going to be a problem, which would include overeating. When you eat extra food, your body doesn't know what to do with it, and it makes it into free radicals. Sometimes it doesn't get through your body without fermenting. And so overeating is a major risk factor for Alzheimer's. In fact, I call it one of the biggest. Ellen White talks about this. She tells one man, I knew you wouldn't remember anything. I thought I might call you out on the fact that you're not remembering, but I realize it's because you're overeating. I'm sort of paraphrasing. And there's a number of Bible texts on that. This talk today is Alzheimer's, stroke, and Parkinson's. I have separate talks on each one of those too. But we go into a lot of the Bible texts about lest to overeat and forget who you are from Psalms. All right, so on the other hand, if you eat less food, we call it caloric restriction. Doesn't mean you have to eat less volume necessarily. For example, it's really less calories. How many calories in a head of lettuce? About 40. How many heads of lettuce could you eat? You're not going to eat very many. Snickers bars. How many calories? 240. How many could you eat? One gentleman told me, he was sitting on the front row on one of my talks, says, I could eat 12. I said, really? He says, yeah, that's how many's in a box. I've done it before. So you get a ton of calories, but the same volume. So caloric restriction doesn't necessarily mean you have to go away hungry and with an empty stomach. It just means you choose the right foods that has less calories. Lettuce instead of Snickers bars, for example. Now, if you get diabetes, it increases your risk of Alzheimer's and obesity by 4 times. So all these lifestyle diseases sort of run together. It's like if you're having one, you probably expect to get the rest. And so it affects you. Obesity, the diets and lifestyle it takes to make obesity tends to make your triglycerides go up. Both oils and sugars can make your triglycerides go up. And so as your triglycerides go up, your risk of losing your thinking ability goes up. Now let's get back to this, caloric restriction. Benjamin Franklin had something to say. He said, to lengthen thy life, lessen thy meals. And so the other way of doing caloric restriction is to eat 2 meals a day instead of 3. Eat breakfast and lunch, and it makes sense because eating in the evening increases Alzheimer's for sure, especially the type of things that Americans eat in the evening. We know from Council's Diets and Foods, if we were to eat a 3rd meal, it'd be best to be just fruit. And that digests quickly, so when you go to bed, it's not still in your stomach. But if there's still food in your stomach and you go to bed, it's turning all night, it's putting food in your bloodstream, it gets caught in your brain, gets caught in other places, and you're more likely to get dementia. So the lifestyle, Ellen White says in the Bible commentary that up until the time of Solomon, Israel ate 2 meals a day. It wasn't until after all those Lebanese workers and those strange women he married, strange wives, that they started having an evening meal, and it became the biggest meal, sort of a party time. The people who really taught us a lot about caloric restriction are the Okinawans. Part of Japan, they eat 40% less calories than Americans. They have 80% fewer heart attacks, 80% fewer breast and prostate cancers, and they're 75% more likely to stay cognitively in tune as they get older. So that's a lesson from big population studies. When we take rats and we cut down the amount of food they eat, they tend to live longer. In fact, one study showed that if they reduced their caloric intake by 65%, they live 65% longer. I doubt that would work in humans, although there are some people that are studying this by doing it on themselves, professors at universities, to see if it does lengthen their lives. We'll find out, eh? So how does it work? Well, when the oxidants increase, the oxidants change the proteins. The proteins then can't do what they're supposed to do. This would be like, albumin and other common proteins getting oxidized. Those oxidized proteins somehow seem to collect in the brain. But oxidized protein itself is a free radical. And when it hits the brain, it's going to cause damage to, astrocytes, podocytes, neurons, all these important cells. And the podocytes in the brain are really the blood-brain barrier, so it breaks down the blood-brain barrier. And then that makes your brain leaky to let in all these odd proteins and make plaque, what we call amyloid plaque. So the whole goal is to reduce free radical formation, and to do this by caloric restriction and eating antioxidants. The other thing that happens, the reason it damages the cells, is it destroys their DNA. It literally latches onto the DNA and causes it not to get transcribed like it should be. So patients with elevated cholesterols have a much higher risk of brain dysfunction. And I'll touch on this as we get into stroke, because high cholesterol also increases stroke. Now, when we think about mental performance, and a diet high in cholesterol. You know, Neil Nedley does a lot with mental performance and with what he calls EQ, emotional intelligence. And he's discovered if you put people on a diet that lowers their cholesterol, it also helps with their thinking and with their ability to reason. And in the studies, it decreases Alzheimer's disease. Now, there's one fascinating thing. There's a bunch of companies out there that'll sell you a pill to lower your cholesterol, a statin drug. But guess what? Statin drugs also make it so your brain doesn't work well. So you might be swapping high cholesterol for low cholesterol, but you're not swapping an unworking brain for a working brain. It's not going to fix that problem. And people taking statin drugs have a higher risk of Alzheimer's too, so it doesn't fix the risk of Alzheimer's. Are rabbits supposed to eat cholesterol? Not supposed to eat my garden either. But they like our gardens because they're vegetarians. But if you feed a rabbit meat or anything with cholesterol, they develop Alzheimer's plaques in their brains. So anything that raises cholesterol has that risk factor for Alzheimer's, and sort of demonstrated by this study in rabbits. And maybe you're thinking, well, I don't use any kind of cholesterol, but maybe you're using margarine or other solid fats, like, maybe not lard, but other saturated fats. A study of 2,560 participants showed that higher intakes of saturated fat and unsaturated fats were associated with greater cognitive decline over a 6-year period. This includes coconut oil, despite all the popular press that if you eat coconut oil, it'll fix your brain from Alzheimer's. I just got a recent study I was going through this week, and because I'm studying a lot into the connection between oil and disease right now. And coconut oil was part of the problem, not a part of the solution. And so trans fat is when you try to make vegetable fats that are liquid into a solid vegetable fat, like for margarine or Crisco or something else. And trans fat's very dangerous for the brain. It's sort of a free radical all on its own. And if we look here at this list, this was a study done to see where the trans fat was hiding. A lot of it was in cookies, cakes, crackers, pies, and breads. Some in animal products, margarine, fried potatoes, potato chips, corn chips, popcorn, household shortening, a lot of sources of trans fat. I was listening to an interesting lecture by a friend of mine. He was talking about trans fat, and he was giving all kinds of illustrations. He says, well, when he learned about trans fat, he knew he didn't want to eat any more trans fat in his diet. But his wife came home that very day from the supermarket with a couple boxes of crackers. He looked at the ingredients. Now, anything that's fried oils or highly heated oils is going to make trans fat. In New York City, they outlawed trans fat in the restaurants. Well, that's not going to help because they're making the trans fat on site. You can take the best olive oil and you put it in that deep fat fryer and a couple of fryings and you're having lots of trans fat. So, but anyway, so the trans fat that my friend was talking about was in those crackers that his wife had brought home. So he's debating. Well, she bought them home. We do like them, obviously, or we wouldn't be buying them. We could eat them now, and then we'll quit. But if I eat these crackers right now, that trans fat will be in my body for about 1.5 years. If I throw them away, it's gone. He pitched them. Because those oils stick in your body for a long time. And it's somewhere between 1 and 2 years, the studies show. And we can actually take people's fat as a sample out of their body and see what they've been largely eating in the way of fats over the last 1.5 years. And so the quicker you can get those out of your body, the better. But it sticks around. So when you go to dieting and you lose weight, they come out faster, though. And that's good.
Is there a temperature in which that occurs? Say like good olive oil, is there a temperature when that begins to start?
I'm sure there is. I'm not sure I know exactly what it is. I do know that even roasting like almonds, when you roast them, it'll make some trans fat in them. Any fat's heated to a level of roasting, which when we roasted almonds, it's usually at 250 degrees. So, but yeah, I couldn't tell you exactly, but the more times you heat it, the worse it gets. But even just one heating will do it. If you put oil in bread, it raises the amount of free radicals in the bread by 10 times. It's amazing. I have an article on my website on oil in bread because it was such a dramatic change. Okay, so people who have more friends have less Alzheimer's. The social stimulation, the interaction, the use of your brain in getting along with others is very helpful. So your friends help you so you have less Alzheimer's. So remember your friends, right? We call it social health. Compared to people with no friends, people who had 6 close friends were 2.5 times less likely to have cognitive decline or heading toward Alzheimer's in a 12-year study. So thank your friends for good social health. Being close to them emotionally is very helpful. When you're close to them emotionally, have good social health, it helps you be happier, enjoy life better, feel more hopeful about the future, have less anxiety and depression, and maintain cognitive ability. So you can do things to improve your social skills from these Bible texts we call the one another Bible texts. Love one another, John 13, 34 and 35. Accept one another, pray for one another, honor one another, encourage one another, carry one another's burdens, serve one another. All good social practices, eh? And so if we just practice the one another text, we could help stave off Alzheimer's. Now, Alzheimer's deaths. Notice here, this slide, look very carefully. It says 20,000 deaths from Alzheimer's in 1995. Well, that's an old statistic. Alzheimer's is the 8th leading cause of death for people 65 years of age and older. Let me hit the button. Oh, Alzheimer's is now the 6th leading cause, and in 2007, 75,000 people died of Alzheimer's. It's increasing. So that went from 20,000 to 75,000 in 12 years. So this is changing fast. In some countries, let's see, Australia, Alzheimer's was the 2nd leading cause of death in the country. So this is increasing, and with this, COVID vaccine and everybody getting amyloid plaque from that, the numbers are probably going to soar even higher. So be prepared. Now here I got a funny slide. Mad Alzheimer's disease. That's not a real name. No, I'm making that up. But some studies show where they actually did autopsies on Alzheimer's patients, which isn't what they usually do because they usually have been in an institution for a long time and there's no question, what disease they had or the nature of their death. But when they did do autopsies and they looked for mad cow disease, 13% of them actually had mad cow disease, not Alzheimer's. Which means we have it in this country, and people are dying of it, and, well, people who eat more meat have more Alzheimer's by a big margin. So, this is there is a 3 times higher risk of developing Alzheimer's in meat eaters compared to vegetarians. That's 3 times. So this brings up the unthinkable that maybe more Alzheimer's is mad cow disease from meat eating than many realize. Well, just keep that in mind. Alzheimer's is also related to high blood pressure. It raises the risk dramatically. Well, then I'll just take more blood pressure pills. It doesn't help. What happens is the lifestyle it takes to raise your blood pressure is what's causing the Alzheimer's. You take blood pressure pills, it accelerates the Alzheimer's by 10 times. For example, diuretics, hydrochlorothiazide, lisinopril, those kind of things. Those increase Alzheimer's associated with high blood pressure, even though it brings your blood pressure down. Why was your blood pressure high in the first place? Most of the time because your brain wasn't getting enough oxygen due to your diet and lifestyle. And so your body has to pump more blood up there faster, and your blood pressure goes up. The fix isn't to turn off the source of oxygen to your brain by bringing your blood pressure down with a pill. The fix is to improve your diet. And we cover that more in our high blood pressure talk. So prevention is the key. Once you're going down this path. Now, I've had people that came and talked to me about their Alzheimer's. One family brought to me their dad. No, he wasn't 75. He was more like 50. He's getting Alzheimer's. He's forgetting, and they listed all that they talked. They knew all about what can we do for him. And he didn't seem that concerned about it. Typical. I looked at him and I looked at them and said, "So let's go through your lifestyle." Went through his lifestyle, went through everything he's doing. I usually start out by asking what to eat for breakfast, lunch, supper, and a bunch of other questions like that about lifestyle. There was a bunch of things in there that were contributing, and so I put him on a program. Told the family, here's what he needs to eat. Don't feed him anything but this. Here's what he needs to do for drinking water and exercise, all the 8 natural doctors. Well, then I was putting together a more comprehensive talk on Alzheimer's. I'm thinking, I should call them up. Pulled up his chart, gave him a call, talked to the family, says, how's he doing? They said, well, he's doing great. No signs of Alzheimer's as long as he stays on the program. Great. And so it's reversible at early stages. And I've met other people. Michigan, there was a family there. They said, yeah, Mom, she got tired of the cold weather. She moved to Florida all by herself. She started straying from the good diet we had her on up here. Pretty soon she had lost all her ability to take care of herself. They brought her back up to Michigan, put her back on their good diet. Within a year, she's back to normal. Recovered. Went from losing the ability to be independent to back to the way she should be. So, prevent high blood pressure, have a healthy lifestyle that makes for a healthy body that supports a healthy brain. Do things that exercise the brain, ongoing education. So my wife has been learning sign language. New education. Find something to do that you like that is interesting. Let's see. Was it in Mountain Home that they used to have a sign language school? No, Harrison. Okay, Harrison. Adventist Sign Language School. Not anymore, but I guess Mountain View is a big spot for sign language with the DOSes, eh? Ongoing education. Exercises that strengthen the brain. Regular physical activity. Cholesterol control. Getting plenty of sunlight on your head. Why on my head? The far infrared from the sun actually penetrates about 2-3 inches into your body, and it bounces off the gyri in your brain and stimulates all kinds of things. So being out in the sun is very helpful for the brain. It brings out the melatonin, which is antioxidant. So we need to protect against oxidative stress, and that's basically done by eating our antioxidants. And classically, people with diseases related to low antioxidants aren't eating enough fresh fruits and vegetables. For example, rheumatoid arthritis patients. We'll be talking about rheumatoid arthritis tomorrow with our autoimmune disease. Rheumatoid arthritis patients in the big studies classically don't eat near as much fresh fruits and vegetables as their counterparts who don't have rheumatoid arthritis. So, lots of good fresh fruits and vegetables. Pomegranates are one of those. They've been studied out at Loma Linda. Mice fed pomegranate juice learned more quickly and had 50% fewer Alzheimer's type plaques in their brains. See, these pomegranates have high levels of phenolic compounds that are antioxidant and protect the brain tissues. But it's not just pomegranates. There's all kinds of fruits that are helpful. Berries, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries. A lot of studies into strawberries and blueberries especially. But any kind of berries. What are other examples of berries? Grapes are really berries. They're good. But lots of fresh fruit, any kind of fresh fruit. And fresh vegetables, green leafies. So really, when we're talking Alzheimer's, we're talking the opposite of intellectual health. We're talking intellectual decay. So intellectual health is what you want. So you have to have a plan to keep your brain stimulated. If you don't use it, you lose it. And so learning new things. Learning stimulates the growth of dendrites through your brain, creates new neuronal networks, new pathways, which can bypass areas in your brain that have really lost the ability to think. Now, Julie's going to talk on neuroplasticity tomorrow, which is really how to recover from Alzheimer's, stroke, and Parkinson's. It's like finding new brain real estate to park your thoughts on and to make your brain more plastic. And so you'll want to come for that. Here we got two people. Yeah, well, okay, what's she learning? She's learning to shoot. Okay, this is a fake picture. He doesn't have headgear on to keep from blowing his eardrums out. So, but anyway, stage. Maybe he's deaf already. All right, mental health with aging. What you want to do is maintain good mental health. You don't have to become demented as you get older. In fact, healthier older adults actually show no decline. They can improve in wisdom, judgment, creativity, common sense, coordination of facts and ideas, and experience. That's what we value the elders for, right? In our communities, people who still have wisdom. And the better you take care of yourself, the better you can maintain that. People who have been examples are like Grandma Moses. She's a famous lady from upstate New York. In her 70s, after she'd retired from, I forget what it was, some hourly job, she decided to take up painting. And in the background is a painting she did, and then I got a couple pictures of there on Life magazine. But she became a sort of like a folk painter. She painted landscapes out there in upstate New York. She became famous when an art aficionado from New York City came up there and saw some of her paintings in a drugstore where she was selling them, pharmacy, and made her famous. They used to have like a Martin Luther King Day. It had Grandma Moses Day in upstate New York, holiday. And she continued to paint into her 90s. Enjoyed it, learned something new in retirement. And so learning stimulates dendrites. Mental health with aging. Mental health as opposed, the opposite of mental health is being crazy, right? Research studies show that a continual exposure to stress accelerates cognitive decline and increases mental dysfunction. So stress is a big thing. But different people respond to different stimuli in different ways. Some people think something's stressful and somebody else wouldn't. And so it's good to have a good plan for dealing with stress. It'll help you avoid Alzheimer's. So if you go to my website, we have several articles on stress and several videos. And yes, some people cause stress, some people get stress. I don't know which this guy is. But those prone to higher distress are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's. People who are easily startled are more likely to have high blood pressure. Chronic stress accelerates the onset and severity of cognitive declines. And so this is a big deal. Well, stress is really about how you emotionally react to stimuli. Yeah, stress is a negative emotion. So really we're talking emotional health. So emotional health affects whether you get Alzheimer's or not. And so emotional health includes the ability to give love, receive love from family and friends. Emotional wounds, especially childhood emotional wounds or emotional challenges, loneliness, stress, anger, depression, all have an impact to increase the risk of cognitive decline. People who are socially isolated, loneliness, definitely have a much higher risk. We already said that people with more friends have less. So emotional health, how do I cultivate emotional health? Well, the fruits of the Spirit are really positive emotional health components. So love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. These are all very important to good emotional health. So, wow, guess we just need to go back to praying for the baptism of the Holy Spirit, huh? Okay, now I'm going to shift gears, and I was at a health conference. It's actually a CHIP training, and one of the general conference doctors was there to support the project, and he told about his mother. He says, my mom worked at the same job for about 40 years. Everybody loved her at the job. They decided to have a big party for her, send her home with a going away party. She's, loved, she's worth it. She had all kinds of plans for retirement, what she was going to do. They gave her this big party. You know, at parties, they don't eat the best of foods. Cake with cream cheese frosting or Crisco frosting or something. All kinds of sweets and who knows what all. Well, retirement party over, sent her home. She woke up the next morning, unable to smile with half of her face, unable to move half of her body. She had a stroke. She spent her whole retirement being taken care of by somebody else. All for a retirement party. Well, how's that work? Here's how it works. Here's your brain. On this side, we have the oxygen level on your brain. We'd like the oxygen level in your brain to be very high. You know, with COVID, we saw a lot of people getting down here. That was bad news. You don't want to go down here. That's very low oxygen. We just had a church member in our church that our son died of sleep apnea because his oxygen level got too low and his brain just basically quit. And but we're going to see what happens here when we eat a high-fat meal that lowers the oxygen on the brain, like eating cake with heavy frosting and so forth. And notice that within 6 hours of eating a high-fat meal, the oxygen on the brain falls below 70%. What's more, it doesn't return to normal for 3 whole days. That's 3 days with low oxygen. That's 3 days with your brain not functioning. That's 3 days in which you don't want to take any tests. Don't try to do your taxes. But next day, somebody's going to eat another high-fat meal. A lot of these people just keep doing this day after day after day. And the moral of the story is, some people have never had a fully functioning brain. Now, don't point any fingers. Don't think of any politicians about now. Don't go nudging your partner. All right. So, and then here's the other thing. Here's a picture of the heart. And we have the left main coronary artery, biggest artery in the heart, that feeds the most heart muscle. If that artery starts getting blocked, then you get heaviness in the chest with exertion, pain or numbness or heavy feeling that goes up to the jaw or down the arm. And, well, it just so happens that you can have 70% blockage before you're symptomatic, before you would feel that. It means you have a lot of reserve, I guess. But in your brain, you have one artery that feeds the frontal lobes. Your frontal lobes of your brain are where you do your higher thinking. It's where your conscience is. It's where you perceive God. But if that artery gets blocked just 20%, we can begin to detect changes on mental status exams. And so I'm figuring that this lady that I just started the talk out with probably already had some plaque in her brain, shutting down some of the blood flow to the brain. Plus she added to that bunch of food at a retirement party that cut the oxygen down in her bloodstream to the brain. And between the two of them, she stroked. And so what do we say when somebody strokes? Well, we have this acronym, FAST. Face drooping, weakness in an arm, speech difficulty, time to call 911. That's sort of the poster you'd see in a lot of hospitals. What is a stroke? Comes in two varieties. It can either be a blockage in the blood flow to your brain, which I'm saying is probably what this lady had, which is called ischemic, or lack of blood flow stroke. The other one is when you bleed in your brain. And that's bad news too. Both of those are going to cause major problems because the result is dead brain tissue. And dead brain tissue then loses its ability to function for you. It might be your memory, it might be your ability to move, it might be a part of your brain that controls functions in the body, like whether you sweat or not, or whether or not your heart goes fast or slow, or things like that. And so you want to make sure your blood is always flowing well. Drink plenty of water, eat plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables, and make sure that your blood vessels are in good repair. How do I make sure they're in good repair? Well, don't eat any oxidized oils or cholesterol, and eat lots of antioxidants, fresh fruits and vegetables. What are the risk factors for stroke? High blood pressure, blowing your brains out with high blood pressure. Diabetes makes all your blood vessels kind of soft and not very strong. Tobacco causes high blood pressure and irritates the blood vessels with inflammation. Heart disease. Alcohol, oral contraceptives. I've treated several patients, young ladies, I say relatively young, who still had young children who had stroked out due to oral contraceptives. Sedentary lifestyle, sitting around too much. High-fat diet, we've covered that. High cholesterol, we've covered that. Obesity, smoking, and stress again. And here we come back to stress. So let's talk about the high blood pressure. High blood pressure indicates low oxygen, so you're already at a deficit there. But also, the higher the blood pressure goes, the higher the risk. And we put blood pressure in different categories. Borderline hypertension, mild, moderate, and severe hypertension. And so the higher your blood pressure goes, the more likely you are to stroke. They figured that if we could lower the average national blood pressure by 5 points, we would lower the number of people dying of strokes in the United States by 23,000 per year, just by lowering blood pressure. Now, cholesterol. Cholesterol thickens the blood. It lowers the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. It causes inflammation in the blood vessels. All these increase the likelihood of stroke, strokes in younger people, first-time strokes. And so getting cholesterol under control naturally. Triglycerides are also part of this picture. Really, cholesterol is partly triglycerides. And so elevated triglycerides increase the risk of stroke and heart attack. If your triglycerides are over 200, it increases the risk of stroke by 50%. I mentioned tobacco doubles the risk of stroke. High salt diet. What high salt does is it makes the blood vessels inflamed and it raises your blood pressure. It thickens the blood and can be associated with higher free radical levels. Dietary salt increases the risk of death from stroke. Usually high salt, while it does make you retain fluid, it's not useful fluid. It's really, a lot of times people who eat a lot of salt and sugar also are dehydrated. And so men on a high salt diet are significantly more apt to die of a stroke than those on a low salt diet. Meat eating greatly increases the risk of stroke and first time ever stroke patients. So consumption of meat is part of the problem. Another national statistic, one research group found out if they went to any city and they counted the number of fast food restaurants, they could accurately predict for the hospital how many people would be coming to that hospital with a stroke in a year. And so more fast food restaurants, more strokes. Largely probably due to salt and probably monosodium glutamate, but I'm sure the oil and so forth also contributes. They particularly looked at the salt for some reason. Another statistic, if we could reduce the sodium intake of an average American to 1,300 milligrams per day. Well, what's that look like in teaspoons of salt? That's about half a teaspoon of salt. What's that down from? The average American takes 2 teaspoons of salt a day. So we're cutting it down by 2 1/4 or by 3/4. And so if we could cut the amount of sodium people take in their body in a day down to 1/4 of what it usually is, or a half a teaspoon, we could reduce the yearly death rate in America by 150,000 people. That's a pretty amazing number of people. What would you think if, we've had a few airplane accidents in the last couple months, right? And we see 100 people go down and it hits the news. How about 150,000 from eating salt? Does that hit the news? But we could save how many airplane loads of people? Well, it looks like, if there was 150 people on every airplane, that would be 1,000 airplane crashes, right? Just doing the math. This would be like saving 1,000. If there was 1,000 airplane crashes, we'd probably quit air travel, right? I had people that saw these 3 or 4 airplane crashes and said, we're not flying. And yet at any given time, there's 1 million people in the air in airplanes. But here we have 150,000. Yeah, okay. Well, all right, hydration. If you're dehydrated and you come in the hospital and you had a stroke, your prognosis is much worse, much more likely to die than if you're drinking plenty of water. One study showed that if you got up in the middle of the night to pee and you drank water, you reduced your risk of stroke, replacing the water you're casting off, right? And so drinking water is very beneficial. How much water should I drink in a day? Average person does need a good 8 glasses, 8 to 12 actually, and so keep that in mind. Another good stroke prevention is exercise. It limbers up the blood vessels, it keeps your blood pressure down, helps your heart rate to be not as fast. Getting 30 to 60 minutes of moderate physical activity per day is very helpful for reducing both heart disease and stroke. How about this fresh fruit and vegetable thing? Here we got it in a study all in one chart, one slide. Notice the ischemic strokes, where the blood flow stopped to the brain, are very high, but if you eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, like go up to 8 servings per day, you drop it by more than half, from 121 to 51. The hemorrhagic strokes, where you bleed, there's a lot less of them than the ischemic strokes, but anyway, 42, and when you ate 8 servings of fruits and vegetables, it dropped down to 12. So that's like less than a third, right? So we're making big progress here just by eating lots more fresh fruits and vegetables. And if you're eating a lot more fresh fruits and vegetables, maybe you're eating fewer things that are less helpful. So that's a brief overview of stroke. And let's go on to Parkinson's. Parkinson's, so we're talking here about the brain today. And again, my wife will be giving the talk on neuroplasticity, which is very interesting. But Parkinson's differs from Alzheimer's in that it includes movement disorder. And there's certain parts of the brain that are especially affected that are different than Alzheimer's. But it also shares with Alzheimer's the dementia, depression, a lot of the other mental illness components of brain pathology. So Parkinson's, what is it? Or how do we diagnose it? We usually diagnose it by clinical features, although there are findings on brain scans. Certain parts of the brain burn out, especially SPECT scans that show where the blood flows. So very classic is tremors of the hands, arms, legs, jaw. They have a rigidity or stiffness. One of the ways we check these patients is we have them put their hand up like this, and then we try to pull it down quickly. And it'll go, we call that cogwheel rigidity. And their movements are slow. They have a hard time initiating movements. I've seen a Parkinson's patient sit there with their walker, and they couldn't get going. The go button wasn't working. And if you came along and kicked their foot so they could start going, they would just go. and they have trouble initiating any kind of movement. And they don't tend to keep their balance. They fall backwards easily, which is disastrous because it's already a brain problem. You injure the brain more with a fall, and it compounds the issue. So we're always giving them walkers to hang on to, and so that they can support themselves. They get dementia, psychosis, anxiety, insomnia, autonomic dysfunction, mood disturbances, depression. It all goes together. About 1 million individuals in the U.S. have Parkinson's, second most common neurodegenerative disease next to Alzheimer's. Peak onset is 55 to 66, but I've seen people in their 40s and 50s with it. And so here's the way it works in the brain. In your brain, you have different places where we call them nuclei. It's where a center is with a bunch of neurons that do one thing. And in your brain, you have a nuclei, sort of in the back over here, that tells you when to go. The go nucleus, I'm going to call it. And then you have another nucleus over here. This is the stop nucleus, tells you when to stop. In Parkinson's, the go nucleus has burned out. The stop nucleus is very active. So active, it's putting the brakes on all the time. Since it's putting the brakes on all the time, that's why you can't go. When I was at Loma Linda, we had a relatively famous neurosurgeon who had figured out, well, I'll just turn off the stop nucleus. So we would take a patient, put a frame on his head, kind of like Frankenstein, right? Well, no. Put pins in the head with a frame, take him to CT scan, run him through the CT scan, so we knew compared to the frame where this nucleus was. Then we take him into surgery, cut a hole, drill a hole in the brain, put a rod down right to where that stop nucleus was and fry it. Amazing transformation. Patients that couldn't walk, that were wheelchair bound, would walk out of the operating room back to their rooms. Interesting. But it's the mismatch between the go nucleus and the stop nucleus. And so they could stop, but they couldn't go. So, does a vegan diet reduce the risk of Parkinson's? Well, it actually does. And we learned this from large population studies, such as the Japanese, the rural Chinese, African, sub-Saharan black Africans. Places where by necessity they're vegan or quasi-vegan, where they just don't have access to lots of, animals. And they have a lot less Parkinson's. A lot less Parkinson's. And so this is, brought up the factor, this is like the China study and so forth. It really makes a difference. Just like with Alzheimer's, caloric restriction helps. And so the reason it helps is because it's those, it's the go nucleus that's getting burned out. This helps save the go nucleus. So in preventing Alzheimer's, it's very similar. Eat lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. Certain foods that are high in vitamin C, B6, B12 would be helpful. Folate. All good. Tobacco is a big oxidant, so it's not great. It causes Parkinson's. High levels of anxiety increase Parkinson's. What if I take an anxiety pill? Doesn't help. It's like putting you in jail so you can't respond to your anxiety, and increases Parkinson's even further. Our expert there at Loma Linda had a chance to evaluate Muhammad Ali, who's known to have Parkinson's. And people often thought, oh, he's a boxer, he got hit too many times in the head, that's why he got it. Well, he was the champion. He probably hit the other guy too many times in the head. And our doctor's assessment was it was stress because his wife and his manager for his boxing didn't get along. And for whatever reason, it was a big triangulation thing, and his stress levels is probably what increased his Parkinson's. Stress is definitely a big key factor for Parkinson's. On the other hand, in my other study, I found new evidence that people who regularly attend religious services and find comfort in their religion are 10 times less likely to get Parkinson's than the average person out in the street who doesn't have Jesus Christ, right? So schedule in Parkinson's, regularity and schedule. When we're trying to recover somebody from a stroke, when we're trying to get them over Alzheimer's, when we're dealing with Parkinson's, we're very careful with schedule. We call it circadian rhythms or chronobiology or chrononutrition. Being on time. Ellen White talks about this. If everybody in camp meeting would keep a good schedule, nobody'd get sick. And she has a lot of things to say about regularity and schedule. She says, you're not animals. Animals eat anytime they want. You're not animals. You can manage this better than them. So regularity and schedule is associated with less Parkinson's, better sleep, less motor disturbances, less depressive symptoms. So keeping a close time. Water consumption, just like with strokes, people who have Parkinson's are classically dehydrated and constipated even 20 years before they come down with the Parkinson's symptoms. Isn't that amazing? So if you're always constipated and not drinking enough water, think Parkinson's. Well, all these diseases really are associated with age, so what we want to do is prevent aging, right? That would be a good thing. Although there's no way to really keep from aging, you can certainly make sure that you slow its onset and prevent the associated degenerative diseases. And so what you want to do is figure out how you can compensate for the fact that, yeah, you have a biological clock, but especially for free radicals that come about as your normal metabolism goes. But there's also external sources of toxins and things that create free radicals: smoking, alcohol, drugs, pesticides, chemicals, diets that are high in processed foods, all these. So what we're looking at here is dietary prevention of aging. Fruit provides 3 times the levels of antioxidants as, say, a diet that is low in fruit or that is animal-based. Vitamin A, C, and flavonoids, they neutralize free radicals, they lower oxidative stress in the body. Top 10 antioxidant fruits, according to one study. I mean, they didn't just study every fruit out there, but they just wanted to find some good ones. Strawberries, plums, oranges, red grapes, kiwi, grapefruit, white grapes, bananas, apple, tomatoes. And vegetables are high in vitamin A and C and antioxidants. Top 10 antioxidant vegetables, according to the same study: garlic, kale, spinach, Brussels sprouts. I mean, there's probably no fresh fruits and vegetables that aren't endowed with lots of antioxidants, but these were just ones they studied and stuck through the laboratory to see what their levels were. So really, you eat your protection, eat your vegetables. Daily consumption of fruits and vegetables reduces the risk of dementia by 28%. And nuts are good. Almonds are a good source of vitamin E and lower your risk as well. Garlic, high in selenium, trace elements, helps the body. What kind of diet are we talking about? Isn't this the original diet? Fruits, grains, nuts, seeds, vegetables, Genesis 1:29 and 3:18. So if you can plan your future, plan your retirement, maximize your health. So if you know everybody in your family died of diabetes, you've got your work cut out for you. Successful aging involves lowering one's risk of diseases. That's what we're really talking about here. So we plan a bright future. Maybe make a mission statement. Write it down. I want to be able to, and I had a friend at 53 decided he'd start running marathons. Hadn't run marathons before, age 53. He started doing that. He ran until he was in his 80s. You ever heard of Hulda Crooks? A famous Adventist lady that in her 60s figured she was out of shape and poor health, and she was married to a doctor, decided she'd start walking for health. Pretty soon she was climbing mountains for health and climbed Mount Whitney every year and became famous, and politicians got their pictures with her. And write a mission statement. I want to be able to climb Mount Whitney by the time she was still climbing it in her 80s. So write down your personal history, health history. Where am I at now? Write down your dreams and goals. Identify where you are in the process of realizing your dreams. Make specific plans for reaching your goals. Get started on the most important tasks today. Now, if you want to go to our website, Northern Lights Health Education, you can find that we have handouts you can download. Presentation handouts. So we have an article on Alzheimer's called Keeping Your Mind Sharp for Alzheimer's and Dementia. And I don't have articles there specifically yet on stroke and on Parkinson's, but they're in the works. And so you can go look up our resources there. You can watch videos and lots of, you can download all kinds of stuff there. Well, any questions?
Something that you don't address, and that's pesticides and herbicides, and HMO and all the onslaught that we have from Alzheimer's.
Yes. In my full talk, that's a whole hour long on Parkinson's, we go into all the different herbicides, pesticides, definitely glyphosate, pyrethrin, big on the list. Pyrethrin's what they spray on most things these days to kill bugs. It's also in insect repellents that you buy to spray on your clothes from Walmart. Glyphosate or Roundup is what everything has. I mean, this planet is just doused in glyphosate. Toxins in the environment definitely increase your risk of all three of these, but especially Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
So that makes it hard to find unadulterated fruits and vegetables. You have to go to organic, but organic don't always mean they're safe.
Right, but you'd be better off eating a carrot than a beefsteak, even if it wasn't organic.
Is Parkinson's considered an autoimmune disease?
Not generally. Although autoimmune disease, with its increase in inflammation, would probably increase the risk of Parkinson's. Yeah.
I just recently found out with your research, because I'm reading the news, a couple of newsletters, that fibromyalgia, most doctors now are doing newer research, believe it's an autoimmune disease.
Yes.
So, and I'm sure I've got it because I've done a lot of my own research. Doctor I go to, she just gives me drugs for it, which I'm taking some. I can't tell you I'm not because I can't stand my pain anymore, but I'm trying to see if I can do more things naturally. So I grew up on a vegan diet, but still I have it. Some people get affected by toxins, etc., more than others, is what I've been reading a lot about. So.
Yes, come tomorrow to our autoimmune inflammatory disease lecture. We'll cover it more. One key element that people don't realize for fibromyalgia that's very helpful is upping your iodine intake. It's not enough in salt. Yeah, take iodine. Take you can buy iodine pills. I know in our local health food store in Ava, they have iodine pills for thyroid. Some of them have 30 milligrams. That's probably how much it would be good to take. Any other questions? Well, very good. We'll see you back tomorrow to talk about neuroplasticity, and come back at 9:30, and we have... yeah, don't forget to change your clock. Well, thanks for coming. You've been a good audience. I guess we have quite a crowd coming for women's ministry tomorrow.